He's eating in between meals.
It's breakfast, Jay. It's 9 o'clock here.
Okay, we're live.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to our second consecutive Fireside with Fathers. There's three of us here now today. We got some big stuff that we want to talk about. It's going to be on Garabandal. If you haven't heard of the Garabandal apparitions, this is just going to be a pretty basic, short summary. It's a hot topic now just because of what stuff's going on. A lot of people are asking, like, are we in the end times? Did Our Lady talk about what's going on right now? Are we all going to die? So it's basically stuff that we're hopefully going to cover in this. There's some controversial things that are around Garabandal, so hopefully we can clarify some of those. And the idea also is that you have questions and you can write them in or ask them directly if you're on the Jitsi. But before we start, I know it's a hard way to start, but we're kind of holding it on our hearts. We got a pretty heavy news this morning. For all those you out there who know our Father Henry passed away this morning. It's no joke. It's serious. We got a phone call at 10 o'clock this morning, and our superior told us that they had found him in the shower. He had an accident. He fell and hit his head, and that's where they found him. And so, like, that's been kind of dominating our whole day, this whole news. And we were not really sure to continue with this, but we're gonna go ahead and continue with it just because it's on. And I think it's good to also just let you guys know that's, like, for those of you who knew him, those of you who didn't know him, that you can pray for him. And like, stories are going to start coming out about his life and what kind of priest he was. He was, for me, fundamental. Like, there was two priests in my conversion that completely just turned my life around: Father Henry and Father Colin. And they kind of played a good combination, because one of them was kind of like the good cop, one of them was the bad cop, and you kind of need that, just like the nice guy and the guy that's just not as nice, like, in the way, like, you know, he can be a little bit harder. But Father Henry for me was a huge role model. He was just he was hilarious. I wasn't interested in the faith at all, but he would kind of start talking to me about sports. That's how we'd always start our conversations talking about sports. He's a big Steelers fan, and we just usually start talking about football, and then from there, I don't know. I don't even really know where they would go, but I just remember really liking the guy, and I kind of saw him as a cool priest. And then obviously, I would have known him for about 11 years, and just kind of getting to know him more. I think, like, the biggest thing that sticks out for Father Henry was just his humility and his simplicity. He was just a humble, simple, very joyful, extremely easy to get along with priest. So all you guys out there who knew him, just throwing that out, just to let you guys know. He died this morning. It wasn't COVID-19 related, but he had been having, like, epileptic fits recently. It had been something that was controlled, and in the last 5 years, it started coming out again, just because they changed his medications. So he had been having episodes kind of sporadic, and this one, it just hit him, and he was by himself, and so that's what happened. But I'm gonna be getting a lot of reflection out of it, to tell you the truth. Just going down memory lane, and, like, the stuff that he used to tell me, the stuff that I learned from him. I just thank God that I knew. He's a giant of a priest. He really was. He was like, he was just so approachable, so humble. I don't know. And yeah, so that's what happened today. And if you guys do have questions about Father Henry, or if you have, like, anything, you can obviously put them in there, and we can go back to Father Henry. It's not a problem. And but what we're really gonna hit today is the like I said, Garabandal. Father René is gonna be doing it. He's got a concise summary. At any point, if you guys aren't following anything, or if you wanted, I don't know, to retouch on something, maybe just raise your hand and put it in the comment, and we'll go right to it. This is informal, like, kind of like a real fireside. If we were at this house, it's nothing like, it's not like a class or anything, so don't worry about cutting this off or anything. So I'm just gonna pull it over to Father René, and like I said, participation's cool. So if you guys have anything that you want to say or whatever, definitely throw it out there.
Feel free to interrupt at any time. The other thing I wanted to say about, like, Father Henry as well is that he was, like, really easy to get along with, and he also had he was really really funny. Like we would randomly get like, let's say it was your birthday or some feast day that he thought of you. He would send you a picture of like that he would make with Photoshop, and it would be like a shark that was like eating you, and then and you were part of the Jaws, and you were like in this bathing suit thing, like trying to like run away from the shark, and the shark was anyway. He would do this type of thing, and it was kind of like scary, and be like, Father Henry, what were you thinking about this morning? And that was his personality. But for me anyway, and as soon as they told us that Father Henry had died, I literally like didn't say anything to anybody. None of us did. We all just like, okay, Father Henry dies. We just like walked to the chapel, and we stayed there like in silence for a while. And I honestly didn't talk like the entire meal time either. I was just like so shocked by it. But for me, the thing that like consoled me immensely was three comments. One was from the Carmelite sisters who were there in Amposta, who is taking charge of. They're convinced that he went straight to heaven, and that means a lot because the Carmelites, it's not like Joe Smo said that someone went to heaven. It's the Carmelites, and they think he went straight to heaven. The other thing was another lady who we're very very close to, also is convinced that he went straight to heaven, a holy lady. And lastly, there was the last priest he went to confession with recently. When they told him that Father Henry had died, he said, "I'm not going to pray for him. I'm going to pray to him." So that also shows like what he thought of Father Henry. And also just you like think of Father Henry, and like we've already noticed like tons of like little details of like providence, and Father Henry loves providence. Maybe too much. Anyway, the Father Henry, Mr. Providence, he would always do like audibles, like subjects would change randomly at any moment. Like let's say you're in a summer camp and like the kids have too much energy, you would instead of saying the rosary, just like sitting there kneeling in the chapel, you'd say the rosary running or something bizarre like that. That never happened, but that type of thing would happen a lot. Anyway, great. So Father Henry, and those three things, the fact that he died so well, and that he wasn't like, the whole reason he was there was also just out of just pure obedience. Like he was told to go to the Carmelites, he was praying so much, and for me that's like a huge relief, and that he was like preparing himself with so much prayer for his death. Anyway, Garabandal. So for anyone who doesn't know about Garabandal, I'm just going to try to go through it like slowly, trying to explain things and try to get through just the juicy sections, just so you get an idea of Garabandal. First of all, Garabandal, you have to know that it's, for those of you who are there, it's a place in the middle of nowhere. Like it really is in the middle of nowhere, because it's in the north of Spain, what's called the mountain area of Spain. And the way you get there now is that you go by a car, but back in the day, no car would arrive there unless you had like a Hummer or like a 4x4. Otherwise, it wouldn't make it there. And it was in the mountains, and this place only had one radio. So just to give you an idea, there was one radio in the entire town. That means like there's no television. It's pretty basic. They were said that the visionaries themselves, they were from poor, like humble families, and there was somebody there's a testimony that says they had fleas, like they literally had fleas, and there wasn't running water in a lot of the houses. I'm not sure how many houses had running water at all. Do you remember the details?
No, I think there was just they didn't have like their own bathrooms either.
They didn't have their own bathrooms.
One public bathroom, like.
Yeah.
Very poor.
Is it still like that?
No, it's better now. It's way better. But it's
one bathroom.
Yeah, one. Because there's right now in Garabandal there is like one like bathroom that everybody uses, but there's more bathrooms. Like people have bathrooms or civilized. It's not that they don't have fleas anymore. Okay, but it was a really humble town in the mountains, and literally like usually when you go to a town, there's like other roads to go other places after you arrive at the town. But in Garabandal, you arrive to Garabandal, and that's it. You don't go anywhere else. Like there's no other like routes anywhere. It's like the end of the road. It's like a dead end street. You know, like when you're doing the mazes as a kid and like you arrive to like a corner, like that's it. Like you just have to go back the same way you came. Anyway, that's the town of Garabandal, And at this time period in Garabandal, it was also a very religious town. In other words, if somebody dies in Garabandal, they pray for that person for the next 100 years. So that's not normal. Usually you pray for somebody for like a time, but not for the next 100 years. And in Garabandal, they had a custom of praying for people for a long time. So if you die in that town, that's actually has its benefits. But the thing with Garabandal as well is that they'd have a bell that they would ring during the day, and they would ring it. I think it was, I don't know if it was for the Angelus, but also at nighttime they would ring it so that everyone would pray for the souls in purgatory, and everyone would go to mass. It was a Catholic community, but it wasn't. It didn't have it wasn't high education or anything of that sort. It was very rural, and the priest was a very major character in the area. Okay, so what happens? Well, in Garabandal, what happens is that the girls they're not like perfect, like saintly girls. They were literally fighting. They're fighting that same day. Moreover, they had stolen some apples that weren't even mature, and they were just to have like a crack, just to have the crack or whatever, to steal something and like to joke about it. It wasn't a big deal because they're just apples from a tree, but they were kind of joking about it, but they're also kind of repented. So what they were doing is they were taking stones and throwing it to the left of them, as if it was like hitting the devil who's like on the left. You know, like the bad angel is on your left. You're throwing it. It has nothing to do with you. It just happens to be on my left. And they're throwing it to the bad angel, because the bad angel was the one that tempted them and made them fight and all this stuff. And in that moment, one of them falls into a rapture. They fall into an ecstasy. In other words, their body becomes cold. They're looking with their head up to heaven, and they fall to their knees. Now that really scared the girls, because they said, "What is going on?" They were actually going to run and tell somebody what was happening, when they themselves also fall into ecstasy. And what happens? Well, they're so impressed that they're going back to the parish, and on the way they meet certain people, and one of the people says, like, "What's happened? You guys look like you saw a ghost or something, like you're just out of it." And they say, "Look, we saw an angel." So they go to the church, and while they're in the church, well, actually one of their, I think it's Serafina, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, one of their teachers like takes them to the church and says, "Look, let's pray a certain prayer that we do." So they pray an Our Father and a Hail Mary and a Glory Be. They did that for, I think they do it for like 6 times or something. They do it a number of times. So that's what they did, but they were taken aback from it. And it was interesting because they were told to like keep a secret, but a secret can't even be kept in that way, because everyone knew about it the following day. And what happens is that the priest went to get the girls after the ecstasy, and went to talk to them in the school, and they interviewed them separately, and they saw that their stories the stories coincided, and they had nothing new to say. But in the case of Conchita, it wasn't something like, "Oh, she's going to be considered a mystic and a holy lady, holy girl for saying these things." On the contrary, when she got back home, she was literally beaten by her parents, by Anitheta, the mother. And so it wasn't something that they were like very proud of in that sense. So it wasn't something that they were getting like candies for. And the same thing with the other girls as well. It wasn't something that was so positive. The other thing is that when this all happened, there are other people who were also asking if this happens again, ask what's happening. And actually that's later on. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, always intervene. Otherwise I'll just be like muttering and mumbling and saying the same thing over and over again. The other thing that's important to remember in Garabandal is that it wasn't just for the sake of seeing an angel, because the angel comes and says to them, and only on the 1st of, because this happened on the 18th of June, but it was only on the 1st of July that the angel actually talks to them for the first time. And this is interesting because the angel says to them and says, "I am here to prepare you to talk to Our Lady." So Our Lady comes to them on the 2nd of July, which at that time was the Feast of the Visitation. And it's actually providential because to come on the Feast of the Visitation was reminding them. That's just the microphone, which is attacking Brother Ben. Brother Christian saved his life. Anyway, the microphone is attacking me. There, okay. I'm looking at the microphone. Great. So the angel was preparing them for Our Lady, and Our Lady came to them on the day of the visitation, because in the visitation it says that when Our Lady visited her cousin Elizabeth, she went quickly to the mountains. And that area of Spain is actually called the mountain area. So Our Lady went quickly to the mountain area in order to serve others. And it's interesting because Our Lady, when she appeared in Garabandal, a lot of times people forget this, but it wasn't just an apparition that happened like once or even 6 times like in the apparition of Fatima. As Judith Albright says, she appears in Garabandal over 2,000 times. That's a lot of times. Like 2,000 times isn't like once or twice. And it wasn't something that was just it was a big deal. And the fact that so many people witnessed so many things is important, because it's a proof of the supernatural as well. Very few times have so many supernatural things been seen in that way. Just some of the details. Look, every single house in Garabandal, which there weren't that many at the time, but every single one of the houses was personally visited by the girls in ecstasy. In other words, they weren't just in ecstasy, like talking to their vision, which could happen, but rather they were in ecstasy and they were walking from place to place. Moreover, whenever they would have an ecstasy, they would have what are called the llamadas. In other words, they would have interiorly the 4 girls, no matter where they were, they would experience how the Lord was saying, how Our Lady or the vision was saying to them, come. And then they would say, hurry. And then hurry, 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 hurry. In other words, there was like 3 moments. First, they'd feel it like as just like they have to like start coming closer. And then it'd feel like you have to run. And then it would be run, run, run. In other words, like run as fast as you can, sprint. So they would experience that, and they would actually come from different areas, and they would come to wherever Our Lady was telling them. And there they would fall into ecstasy and kneel down, and they would see Our Lady. The other thing with Garabandal is that Our Lady is there as a mother. That's like that's like the point. Because if in Fatima she comes as Our Lady of the Rosary, in Lourdes she comes as, how does she come as?
Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
In Lourdes, that's true. Actually, that's an interesting point as well. In Lourdes, she actually comes the last time. She comes as Our Lady of Mount Carmel, which is one of those details that actually points to Garabandal as well. But in all these places, like in Garabandal, she appears as our mother, and this is seen especially by the fact that she actually acts like a mother. Like she would joke around with the girls, like when they'd say like a stupid phrase, Our Lady would actually repeat the phrases that they said. So I'm trying to think of a stupid phrase. Give me a stupid phrase.
I think it was just like grammatically incorrect. I think when they would say,
like they would say something grammatically incorrect.
They repeat it just
like I
saw a lot of sheeps.
I saw a lot of sheeps. Is that bad?
Sheep, yeah. Sheep.
Okay. Saw a lot of sheep. Saw a lot of sheep. Saw a lot of sheeps. Anyway, that would be a bad phrase. Our Lady would have repeated me saying that several times. But it was interesting because there was actually a moment when one of the what do you call them, theologians, was like these like French theologian came up to the girls, and they were praying in the church. They were actually in ecstasy talking to Our Lady, and at that moment the girls started to laugh hysterically, and this like theologian was actually scandalized, thinking like, how dare they laugh in a church when a church is supposed to be a place of like deep prayer and recollection. So he was indignant, so he asked like, why were they laughing? And the answer was because the girls tried to sing the Salve, like Salve Regina, and they actually did it so bad, like they missed the note completely, that Our Lady looked at them singing, heard them singing, and just started cracking up, like the belly laugh. Like usually the stature of Our Lady is usually like this, like very pious. Well, this moment Our Lady was like, ha 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 ha. She was like falling over, laughing. And the girls, seeing Our Lady laugh so much, started laughing as well. Like, it's just this, they realized like they need to practice their singing, like a lot of us. And yeah, so that was the reason that Our Lady was singing, because she was a mother. And she was a mother who was also like training them. She would also, like, for instance, I'm fascinated by the fact that there was one moment when one of them was supposed to go take out the laundry and to hang up the laundry, and she was kind of scared. You know, the dark, it's kind of, you don't really want to go outside, it's cold, it's damp. And anyway, she ends up, okay, for love of Our Lady, I'm gonna take out the laundry. So she takes out the laundry, she goes to hang it up, and in that moment, Our Lady appears, and she helps her to hang up the clothes. So that's what mothers do. They help out with those type of things. I think
They play hide and seek as well.
play hide and go seek. That's a great one. They're in the pines, you know, like the pines where a lot of people go to pray. We also go to pray whenever we can. We'd love to be there. But that's not only where they would pray, but it's also where they would play hide and go seek.
And she would ask, Our Lady would ask the kids, tell me about like the cows, tell me about, you know, everyone in the village. Like as a mother, she wanted to know, you know, what was going on with her children, you know. So it was really.
We have some questions. Is that right? Yeah.
All right, the question, I think it might be a little bit, we haven't really gotten to
We'll
that.
yeah.
You want to
We
do
can
it?
do it.
Now?
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so
Yeah, questions
Alan's
are-
got the first juicy question, which we thought would be coming out. And then Christy, that's Brother Brian's mom, isn't it? Or is it not? Am I wrong? They're trying to live. Sorry. After this pope, there will be only 3, and after that will be the end of times. Can you relate the message to what is going on in the church today?
Okay. The first thing is that you're right, there is a phrase like that, and it wasn't like an official message in Garabandal. But look, if you're talking to Our Lady like 2,000 times, and sometimes during like 5 or 6 hours, you might hear a number of things which are important. And one of them is this phrase, which is, there are, after this pope, there's only 3 popes, and then it'll come the end of times. It doesn't say the end of time, which is good to remember. It's not the end of time, it's the end of times. And the other detail is that you have to count, you have to know how to count it, because Our Lady explained how you have 3 popes. So you have, it was at the time of John the 23rd. So after John the 23rd, you have Paul the 6th, John Paul the 1st, who doesn't count. So it's John Paul the 2nd.
Wait, want to say
And then Benedict this. Oh, John Paul the 2nd. John Paul the 1st doesn't count because it was such a short pope. He was only in the office for a month.
Didn't she
So
say
that's the reason-
there'd be? I think she did say, as also she did clarify that there would be one that wouldn't last very long, so he wouldn't count, and that
Exactly.
was JP1, which was
Yeah.
literally a month long.
Exactly. So she actually did clarify that. That wasn't something that surprised anyone. And a month is very short. Like historically, he didn't have that much of an influence as other popes have had. So there's three popes. So it's Paul the 6th, John Paul the 2nd, Benedict the 16th, and it says the end of times, but doesn't mean it's the end of the world. And all the girls, whenever they hear these messages, they're not the ones who interpret it. They always say, "Look, we'll leave it to the church, and to those to whom it corresponds to interpret it." But the thing that we can say, as well, just talking about it, is that, okay, this is just on a personal level. Look, for me, it has been helpful to know that something has changed with Pope Francis, in the sense, not in the sense that all these people out there like, oh, he's not a pope, he's not a valid pope. I'm not like that, because he is a valid pope and he is the pope. But there is a change of times. Like, things nowadays are different. For instance, I can't leave my house. That's pretty different. Other things that are different. Well, the things of the magisterium now is more confusing than it was before. Like, whenever something would come out with Benedict the 16th, it would be very, very easy to just to read and to be calm about. But same thing. Well, with Pope Francis as well, it's not that hard to follow. But I think the difficulty comes with some of the phrases that he might say that aren't official. I think that's what most confuses people. For instance, the whole thing of the what was that?
Amazon
Synod and all these type of things. Anyway,
No, we just had a talk by this book was written by one of our brothers, Father Jose Luis Saavedra. Like, there will be a link afterwards if you guys want it. it's not. I thought like this was probably the best thing out there right now on Garabandal because it's so historically like good, and at the same time he keeps it as like a story, so it kind of reads really easily and well, and you will get everything on Garabandal through this. But he just gave a little conference, and the clickbait title was Garabandal in COVID-19. So like it was streaming, and there was over 2,000 people watching it while it was streaming. So it was obviously very juicy, and he didn't get into anything juicy. He was very kind of like prudent on the whole thing, but he did say that Benedict the 16th in his last interview with Peter Seawald, I don't know if you guys have seen those books, with Light of the World is one of them. There's the second one, I don't remember what it's called, and then the last one's called The Last Conversations. And in that interview, Peter Seawald asks him if he thinks he's the Pope of like a new era. And he says that he does consider himself as a Pope, like on the threshold of some an era that is changing. So Father Jose Luis was kind of interpreting that as like we could be in a new era or new times of the church, whereas old times have maybe ended. So he's kind of like tying that in to like, are we in the end times? Well, with what Benedict the 16th said to Peter Seawald, you could interpret it that he was considering that we are like at the end times, and then like what that means is like different.
What that means. Anyway.
Noble wants to speak.
Nice.
So ask him if he wants to speak.
Noble, do you want to speak? Do you?
Yeah, tell him he has his hand up.
Noble, you have your hand up.
All right, hold on just a second.
We're about to launch Noble on his YouTube career here, so this is exciting.
All right, say that again, Noble. What'd you say?
No, he answered my question already. It was about what the end of times ago.
You said you answered it already, because with the
You
end
answered.
times.
Okay. Nice.
Okay. Anyway.
Then Christie's question. Do you want to answer Christie's?
Can you talk about the significance of Saint Michael also appearing? Nice. Now, here's the thing. With Saint Michael did appear in Garabandal. Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
his name comes out, right?
He opened it up, yeah.
Okay. I'm starting to doubt myself here. Yeah, I'm a great specialist on Garabandal. Anyway, so Saint Michael appeared in Garabandal. And what is the significance of that? Well, there's several significances. First of all, you have to remember that at this time they're already praying the prayer to Saint Michael after every Mass, as Leo XIII had asked them to. And the other thing to remember is that Saint Michael is the one who defends the church in the time of battle. And I think that nowadays we're definitely in a battle, and Garabandal was announcing a battle, which is kind of obvious, because if you're saying that anyway, we'll get into the messages. Yeah, you're gonna say?
No, go ahead. No.
The other thing is that I think one of the things I think is also important is to remember that I can't remember his name. What's the guy, the Jew who converted? Ratisbon? Yeah. Alfonso the Ratisbon, who had a huge conversion. This is a detail which I think is really important, because in Garabandal, which is different than I think, I don't know of any other place like this, but Garabandal, the miracle of Garabandal, which will happen, is for the conversion of the entire world. And one of the things that Garabandal talks about, one of the things that it showed was the conversion also of the Jews, which is a really big deal. Because there's a moment when I don't know if it was the priest or the people in the area, they said that they should throw holy water on Our Lady, like they did in Lourdes, and I think it was in Lourdes as well. Yeah, they threw holy water on Our Lady. They sprinkled holy water. When Garabandal, they didn't sprinkle holy water. They took a huge bowl of holy water and they threw it at Our Lady. And this is what happened. There was witnesses there, and there were several of them who have given witness to it, including the girls themselves. And all that huge bowl of water went in front of them, and then it went backwards, and it became like little droplets and soaked just one person, while the people to the left and the people to the right were totally dry. So it totally soaked one person while the other ones were remaining dry. The reason this is interesting is because the girl who was totally soaked was a Jewish girl. And this Jewish girl was praying the rosary secretly that nobody knew about, that Our Lady had seen. And within a year, if I'm not mistaken, she was baptized, and she asked the girls of Garabandal what name to take, and she took the name of Carmen. And this is important because what it reminds us is that God is trying to convert everybody, including the Jewish people. And one of the details about that has to do with Saint Michael, which is where I'm going, although it's like I'm like going like way out there and eventually coming back. The detail is that with Alphonsus de Ratisbonne, who was a huge conversion, one of the conversions to miraculous metal, "O Lady, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to you." He was repeating that phrase because a friend of his had dared him. "I bet you can't repeat this. You can't pray this prayer." So he started praying that prayer, and he was repeating it and repeating it till that, I don't know if it was 2 days later or something. And you have to remember that he was a Jew who was not thinking about converting at all in any way. But as soon as he walked into a chapel, he was in front of an image of Saint Michael, the archangel. And in that moment, in front of the image, Our Lady appears to him. He immediately converts. Tears run down his cheeks, and he gets baptized as soon as possible and becomes a priest, dedicating himself to the conversion of the Jews. So I think it's an interesting detail also to remember that he was converted in front of Saint Michael, and that here also there's also Saint Michael is also working for the conversion of Jews. So I think it's a detail to at least in my heart, it's always something that I see clear. Yeah.
I was just going on it's contemporary with Vatican II as well. And what you were saying in the beginning, as far as like the town of Garabandal, their idea of a priest, of a bishop, of anybody in the clergy was extremely high. Like in Spain, you can still get these people that they'll kiss your hand as a priest because of like the respect and like the status a priest has. So we'll get the messages really quick. We'll say that the messages, but in one of the messages it says, and this was the shocker message. This is why Garabandal is really shaking things up, because they said many priests, bishops, and cardinals are on the way of perdition and leading souls on the way of perdition. So in the context when they had said this was an absolute scandal. It was unthinkable and it was unbelievable. And from where we are now, looking back, when the rupture and everything started coming out, the 60s and the 70s, in the church, and Paul VI said that the smoke of Satan has entered into the church. It kind of puts things in a light, whereas when they had said it in the time, that would not have made any sense, and it would have been, like I said, scandalous. I just getting stories off my dad, just the way clergy were behaving themselves in the 80s, and he was in seminary, so he was having a first-hand experience of what was going on in there, and it's scary. It's absolutely terrifying. And the fact that these little lobbies and groups of, well, in his case, they were homosexual seminarians, the way they got together and they pushed out the good guys that were supposed to be becoming priests, whereas they were never supposed to become a priest. They never had a vocation. And now, in hindsight, you see all these scandals, you see abuse, and you're really questioning, well, if you got a guy in there that never had a vocation to be a priest, and he was in there for the wrong reasons, and he was perverted, it's not surprising that there are so many perversions coming out. And then all of a sudden, like, obviously all priests have been labeled as that. So Saint Michael coming in and bringing in, he's opening up the apparitions. I also see him as, like Father Renee said, the protector of the church, the one who's supposed to throw Satan out, and the one who, who protects us. So it's no surprise there with like the situation. And obviously now, slowly the stuff that leaks out and the stuff that we're aware of, it's no surprise, this whole thing of leading souls to perdition.
I was just going to comment how I think it's really cool also how a lot of times when we think of angels, we think of them as kind of like, you think of Saint Michael as being this like buff angel with like metal wings and like Roman armor. But in Garabandal, it's Saint Michael, but he appears as a child, he's described as a child. But they look at him as a child has a huge amount of power. So I think that's a way of describing the angels, which is, in other words, their simplicity and a power which is serene and not in the exterior, but there is a power.
Another detail too is on that second message that Father Luke was talking about, when Saint Michael, the archangel, gave the message. Later, Our Lady explained to the girls like why she didn't appear to the girls, because it was so sad for her to to tell them that news about like her bishops, priests, and cardinals, what was going on, and we'll get later into the more of the message, but yes, so it was just so sad for Our Lady. Yeah.
I don't know if it was the first time or the second time, but one of the times because there was two public messages in Garabandal. In spite of all the different things, there was two official public messages, and in those two messages, one of them, the first one, I don't know if it was the first one or the second one, I can't remember, but in one of the messages, I think it was the second one. The second one, they were supposed to give it in the church at 10:30, and because out of obedience, they ended up giving it, in obedience to the priest, they ended up giving it at 8 o'clock in the Pines, which wasn't what Our Lady wanted, but Our Lady permits these things, and it shows also how there can be like difficulties. For instance, like also in the case of Garabandal, the girls were asked not to enter into the church with Our Lady, so as not to like scandalize people by talking with Our Lady in the church. And did they do that? They did. They were always obedient. Like all the girls have always had that example of obedience and reverence for the magisterium and for the priests. There was a huge respect for priests. And I think it's impressive. Like when they would actually like fall into ecstasy, they would be running in ecstasy, like all of them, and they'd run, and they'd stop dead in front of the church door, even if the door was open. They would just stop. They'd get as close as they can to Jesus and stop out of obedience. And those details are huge. It's interesting. Speaking of obedience, Our Lady taught them obedience like personally. Like for instance, there was this one occasion when one of them had disobeyed their parents in order to be with Our Lady. I don't know if they had been like staying up without having permission to stay up, but in order to fall into ecstasy and be with Our Lady. So what Our Lady did to teach them that they have to obey their parents even more than wanting to see Our Lady, she didn't appear to her for the next month. Like that's pretty tough. But that's a good mother. A good mother also knows how to correct. And correct not just on anything, not just because you ate a chocolate, but because you're correcting something which is important. Because you want to make them into saints, which is what it's about.
Messages maybe get into.
Yeah. I was just gonna
go ahead. No.
So like keep the questions coming. Guys, those are great. And no, Father Rene mentioned, like, for me, this is the biggest thing. I think, like, initially with Garabandal was the whole ecstasies thing. Like, for those of you guys who are not really familiar with ecstasies, it's referring to a state that they would fall into, nothing that they would take or anything like that. It's just a state that they would fall into. And in Garabandal, like, I saw when I was in college, one of my roommates put on a video of Garabandal, and I honestly, to tell you the truth, thought he was showing me, like, this new, like, horror movie that was coming out. I was terrified. It was like a 5-minute thing of them. Like, you can actually, if you look up on YouTube, put in Garabandal, you can watch the videos of these girls in ecstasies, and it terrified me. And then like afterwards, you're saying like, no, they were seeing like Our Lady, and he told me it was something religious, but I still had that kind of in my mind that it was freaky. It really was. And the doctors who were there, like the professionals, they said the same thing as far as like, you cannot explain this through science, what is going on right now. The way they would poke them and pinch them, and they would try to turn their face, they would try to lift them up. They couldn't be moved. They couldn't be moved, and they couldn't feel anything either while they were in these trances, they would call them. The young guys couldn't keep up with them, the way they would be running up the hill with their face looking upwards. Like I said, like, look at the videos. They're there, like, backwards and forwards. And this whole phenomenon, for me, what really got it after reading this book, and I think this is why, like, this book is really recommended as far as, like, historically putting just basically the evidence that's here, like the doctors' testimonies. They said, because this is a big thing with Garabandal, and like I think it's one of the most important things for a lot of people out there, is that all 4 of these girls denied these apparitions. And that has to be said. Like, the movie which they just put out, it's so class, because they start the movie off with Conchita denying that she had these apparitions. So like, people are like, wait a second, if the girls and the bishop, like, that's what he guys like, if the girls themselves denied it, what else do we have to look for? It's not real. It never happened. And so the professionals who are on the ground and they were watching this whole thing, one of them said, and for me this was a kicker, he said, like, Garabandal doesn't belong to these girls anymore. It's not theirs. He's like, from a professional point of view, what had happened and what we've been observing and seeing, is, scientifically speaking, something that cannot be explained. So they could deny it all they want. They can say what they want. But what I saw and what we were observing there has no explanation. It's a supernatural phenomenon. So like with Garabandal, there's basically you have two ways there. Like it's either from God or it's from the devil. Because humanly speaking, it's not possible what was going on there. It was a paranormal activity, if you want to call it that. And so like this why this book's so good as well, because then it goes into the fruits, and from the fruits you will know them, and how, like Father Rene was saying, like Our Lady was always respecting the clergy. She was always respecting obedience to the church. All the theologians are unanimous in agreeing that there's nothing here that's against the doctrine of the church, that the church has always taught against the gospel. It heavily promotes the Eucharist, the clergy, a renovation of your prayer and penance. Like it's all there, like all the fruits are there. And like the message of Garabandal can be like zoned down into the Eucharist. It's a Eucharistic apparition, and all the importance going back into the Eucharist. The angel would also bring them Holy Communion. The big miracle of Garabandal that happened was basically Conchita receiving the Eucharist, which people like were kind of deceived because they wanted to see something huge like the sun dancing and stuff, and it was just like this little miracle of like her receiving communion. So like the ecstasies and stuff, you guys, like I said, you can see that on YouTube. The negations are also very interesting because the author of the book goes into Lourdes and Fatima, and Lucia and Fatima had a doubting period there where she was even doubting if she had even seen them. Lucia and Fatima. Bernadette and Lourdes had the same experience, and some of the big saints like Saint Teresa of Avila, Mother Teresa of Calcutta also had these crisis moment where they're like they don't even know if they actually had these visions or these experiences. So it's something that he says is normal. It's normal like in these kind of things, so it's not heavy enough to like debunk it. And then the most important thing is that the pressure that these girls were under, just like in Fatima, they were threatened with excommunication within this Catholic village that is basically saying you are condemned to hell. You're not going to get buried in the church. You're excommunicated. You're going to die without the sacraments, and we're going to bury you like a dog. That's what they would say to these little girls, these 12-year-old girls. And it was absolutely terrifying. And not the parish priest that was there during the revelations, but the new parish priest basically like twisted their arm to say like just deny everything. It never happened, and we'll just keep it at that. So that right there is something that's important to say, like the denials, the supernatural fact of it, that it was something that was supernatural, the way that these girls were moving. And like there's like two things I think we do have to get. So like the messages would be important to talk about, and the current situation of like the church on Garabandal, like what they received as far as like the community.
I can say it in Spanish, you can translate it. Hay que hacer mucha penitencia.
Okay, well, look, he's just doing he's going to do the message right here. We'll just read it. It just... Is it the Spanish one? We have to do a lot of penance.
Mucha penitencia, muchos sacrificios.
A lot of sacrifices.
Visitar al Santísimo.
And we have to visit our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament.
Pero primero tenemos que ser muy buenos.
But first of all, we have to be very good.
Y si no lo hacemos, vendrá un
And if we
castigo.
aren't, and if we don't do all these things, a chastisement will come.
Ya está llenando la copa.
The cup is filling up,
Y si no cambiamos,
and if we don't change,
vendrá un castigo muy grande.
a chastisement will come. A big chastisement will come. That's the first message that was delivered, and like there's a whole lot of like that's the first message of Garabandal. That wasn't heated, obviously, and then you want to just go to the second.
Yeah,
and then this is the second message.
Como no se ha cumplido mi mensaje.
So as
del
my
18
first
de octubre,
message was not fulfilled on the 18th of October,
os diré que este es el último.
I'm going to tell you that this is the last message.
Antes la copa estaba llenando,
Before I said that the cup was filling up,
ahora está rebosando.
now it is filling over. It's overflowing.
Muchos sacerdotes
Many priests,
Obispos y
bishops,
cardenales
and cardinals
van por el camino de la perdición
are on the path of perdition,
y llevan consigo a muchas más
and they're
almas.
bringing a lot of souls with them.
Debéis evitar la ira de Dios
You
sobre
have to
vosotros
avoid the anger
con
of God
vuestros esfuerzos.
on yourselves with your efforts.
Yo, vuestra madre, os
I,
quiero
your
mucho
mother, love you
y
so
no
much,
quiero vuestra
and
condenación.
I don't want your condemnation.
Ya estáis en los últimos avisos.
You are now in the last warnings.
Pedidnos sinceramente
Ask us
y os
sincerely,
lo daremos.
and we will give it to you.
Debéis esforzados
You
más,
have to make more of an effort.
pensar en la pasión de
Think in the
Jesús.
passion of our Lord.
I think I skipped one. A la Eucaristía se le da cada vez menos.
And the Eucharist, there's
A la Eucaristía se le da
yeah.
cada vez menos importancia.
the Eucharist is getting less and less importance.
Was it? Yeah. I skipped that.
Yeah, that's basically the nugget.
Yeah,
that's the most
Yeah,
important
that's
thing.
so important.
And the symbolism there of the cup is basically like it's like the cup of abominations that are happening, like all the crimes and sins that cry out to God. And if you think of just the way things have been going, if you guys are in Ireland, if you're in the States or wherever, it's something that you can obviously see how you're just saying, like, how much longer can this go on? Of like the amount of abortions that are going on, the families being destroyed,
Is this another
just
phrase?
thousands of things that you can think of that are happening. That's basically like our context of it. And then
I think it's interesting as well. I remember Father Solis said this, and for me it was like really important when he said how in the second message it says, since you didn't, como no se ha cumplido mi mensaje del 18 de octubre, in other words, since my first message wasn't made known to the world, as like people like, oh, Our Lady spoke, who cares? Because of that, the messages stopped in Garabandal. In other words, the lack of apostolate, Our Lady wanted us to teach us the importance of doing apostolate so much that she made it so that by not doing apostolate because of the first message, she stopped after the second. I think that's an important point.
Yeah. Another thing, what Conchita actually said with like the whole apparitions, she says like none of this, all these apparitions don't serve for anything if we don't live the messages. So that's like the most important thing. Like everything, all these like supernatural like acts like definitely help us to believe in like the prophetic message is like an important part, but it's not the most fundamental. It's not the center. The center is to live the messages and to visit more the Blessed Sacrament, to meditate more on the Passion, to do more sacrifices. I think that's like the bottom line, and that Our Lady is our mother. She wants us all to get to heaven. So I think that's.
We probably like skipped tons of things. Anyway,
I'll just hit the one. What I think is the
Yeah.
most important, like now, just like the current, is this whole idea that people are saying, like, all right, well, Garabandal is like, obviously the church disapproved that back in the day, and it's over. Like the case is closed. I think that's very important to hit. It's Cardinal Ratzinger who would have had the report on his desk, and that he had to sign. They were asking him to sign it, and he just basically threw it back to the bishop that was there, saying, look, you've been on the ground, you've seen like with your commission, which is basically the team that was studying it, you have all the information you need to make the decision, and it is your job anyways as the bishop of that area to do it. So the bishop stayed with the same thing which 20 years ago the first bishop had said, which was basically not sure. All right, we're just, to put it into English terms to make it easier for you, there's three options when it comes to Marian apparitions. It's you're sure that there's a supernatural activity from God here and it's approved. You're sure that it's not from God and that there's not anything going on here, so that's disapproved. And then the third option is you're not sure. So you're saying that we're just not sure here. So like the status of Garabandal and what Ratzinger would have seen on his desk and sent back to the bishop is saying Garabandal right now is an open case. We're not sure. And it's important to talk about this team, this commission. Okay, so it was called a commission. It was a team of specialists who were going to like study what was actually going on in Garabandal. The guy who was spearheading it was Dr. Morales. He was a very well-known figure in Santander for his he was a psychologist, so he knew all these like techniques. He could hypnotize people, and he was just like the latest, as far as like that science goes. And he was an expert. People really revered him. He was there about 4 times, like actually on the ground there with the girls, like observing it from the beginning. And these are his own words. From the beginning, he was against it, and he was already made up that this was all made up, that it was what he called like a collective hysteria. Everybody had gotten together, they got a little crazy, and they're just like having some kind of like childish game. He said this 20 years later in a testimony, that he says everybody knows that the fact that Garabandal is a fact and what was going on in Garabandal was real, and that from the beginning I was against it. This was his own testimony. So he was in charge of this first team, this first commission. His reports went back to the bishop. against all like a lot of other doctors that were there and against a lot of other people that were saying like, are you serious? Like you haven't even been here as long as we have, and the stuff that's going on here is mind-blowing, and it really deserves to be like seriously studied. So the first commission was a joke, and that's what the bishops got, so they signed it off. Look, we can't make a decision here, we're not sure. 20 years later, another commission of the team was sent. It was spearheaded by an atheist. He was convinced in the beginning that this whole thing was for real estate, that the town of Garabandal wanted to pump up their real estate. When the first message was coming out, 5,000 people in sleet and extremely hard conditions walked 6 kilometers to make it to Garabandal to be there for the message. Like it was attracting a lot of attention in Spain. So like he was kind of convinced that they were there because they wanted their property value to go up. Same thing. They interviewed about 3 or 4 people. They weren't there long enough. And they said from the beginning that it was just going to be the same report as it did 20 years ago, which was there's no investigation, nothing seriously done. So we know Garabandal is standing right now, as far as the church goes, on 2 fake studies that really never happened. There was nothing seriously done there. And there is no definite answer. It's not sure. So that's right now is the state of Garabandal and Rome.
Ronan wants to speak.
Yeah, sorry, Ronan.
Get you.
And also Padre Pio. He's
Andrew.
I know the whole story. The letter that
Yeah.
he sent.
Cecilia Bordon Parma.
Yeah. I'll say these and then we're gonna end with Padre Pio. Look, we wanted to start off with this, but this is actually on the back of the book, which I think is class. It's 4 saints, 4 canonized saints, and their opinions on Garabandal. The first one's Saint Paul.
Sorry. You're okay. You're good.
St. Paul VI, this is what he says. He says, Garabandal is like a second life of the Blessed Mother on earth. There are not words that I have to thank her. That's St. Paul VI. St. John Paul II, that the message from the Mother of God in Garabandal, may it be taken in the hearts of all of those before it becomes too late. Paro.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes. Sorry. Okay.
All right. Did we get St. John Paul II's message?
Say it again, man.
So this is St. John Paul II. That the message of the Mother of God in Garabandal, may it be taken into the hearts of men before it becomes too late. That's St. John Paul II. St. Teresa of Calcutta, from the beginning I felt that what was going on in Garabandal was authentic. And this is St. Padre Pio, who has a very close connection with Conchita and Garabandal. He says, "Oh, blessed girls of Garabandal, they do not believe in you or in your conversations with the White Lady, the Blessed Virgin. They will believe when it is too late." So that's Saint Padre Pio, and these are the 4 saints that are kind of like, those are their remarks on Garabandal youths.
Just more details about Padre Pio. The girls they received a letter from Padre Pio when he was still alive, and saying, like, encouraging them in their message. But the other detail is that they said to him, "Well, can you come here? Because if you come here, people will believe it." And he says, "Look, I'm not like Santa Claus. I can't just like come down a chimney." But the thing was that later on, the girls with Cristina Bordon Parma, who was the princess of Spain, Conchita was traveling with the princess of Spain to San Giovanni Rotonda. And when she was there, they told Padre Pio that Cristina Bordon Parma was there to talk with him. And Padre Pio said, "Look, she can come in the evening. I don't have time right now. In the evening, or maybe tomorrow or the following day." Pretty much saying, "Look, I'd have more other things to do." And then they said, "There's also some girl called Conchita." And Padre Pio responds, "Conchita? From Garabandal? And have her come in immediately." So, like, if you're a princess, that doesn't, like, if you're even the queen, it doesn't, like, affect him. But if you're Conchita from Garabandal, he cares. So I think that's important to remember, like, how highly he held and how much he esteemed and how much he cared about what these girls thought and about their opinion and about who they are and their importance in life and for history.
Yeah. So I think we can just nip it off here we'll just answer Alan's last question there, and then we'll nip it off. Like I said, if you guys do like this book, we've got a bunch of them here. We can send them off to you. We'll give you a little discount too. I think it would be like a special Fireside discount. But I do think it's worth reading it, especially in these times where there's more time to be reading. And like I said, it reads very easily. It's got some interesting pictures and stuff from her private journal and spiritual direction that she had with her spiritual director, which was a nun. And this kind of touches on Alan's question, because he says, well, didn't it say that there's going to be something kind of like going on, something severe in the church when we were last times? Conchita wasn't very sure on like these concepts that she heard or these words that they heard. They were young, not very cultured girls, like you said, like not very well educated. So like if they heard vocabulary or if they heard stuff, they didn't know what was going on, like communism in Russia, like who's Russia, like what the thing they said here with the church was there was some kind of like synod, some kind of like a council thing that was going to go, a synod that was going to be going on. And she didn't know what that was. She didn't know what that meant. A lot of people thought that maybe was going to be the Synod on the Family when that happened in its day, or the Amazon Synod, but some kind of like gathering in the church. I know there's people now, and this is something that's important to say as well for all you who are like maybe too much into prophecies and conspiracies. Like I don't debunk a lot of stuff that has been said. Like the third secret of Fatima is very interesting. A lot of people are asking if that's going on right now, like with the Pope going through Rome with corpses, and going up a mountain, and they're kind of comparing it to his Ubi et Orbi blessing that he gave to an empty square. Like, I don't know. But the fact that, what was I going to say before that? Oh yeah, look, the fact that you're going into too many prophecies or too many conspiracies can also be dangerous. It's just an overconsumption of information, and what it actually ends up is it takes you out of the important daily routine that you're supposed to be doing, your daily prayer, your daily penances, and your spiritual life. It is a very good way of pulling you out of it, and then you just start living in like, all right, trying to connect things, dates, are we in the last times, this happened, this thing has to happen, and you end up getting lost in all of that. So like that's important not to have like a simplicity about you. No, like stuff is going on and it could be, but that just has to call you to a greater spirit of conversion. Like we found out this morning, Father Henry dies, and you're like, what's going on? Like, what if you died tonight? What if you died tomorrow? And God's not going to ask you if you got the date right, or if you were really on the ball with like the coming of the kingdom. If you really were following that, he's going to be like, dude, what were you doing yesterday? Like I want to know what you were doing yesterday. Like, were you really taking care of your soul? So like that's obviously on a personal level what we got to be fixing our eyes on. But
amen, brother.
Yeah.
5 minutes. Okay. Look, another thing that Father Luke was saying, although I think that point is like the main one we want to hit on, and like that's way better than what I'm going to say. But anyway, the thing I was going to add on was that the girls, like the whole word like communism, like in the case of Fatima, it was the word Russia, that they thought Russia was like the donkey of the next door neighbor, or a different lady who from down the street who must have lived really bad, and so she must have been really bad, so Russia was going to spread her errors. So that was the culture. But in the case of Garabandal, the girls had did not know what communism meant. Like they said that the church will be going through communism when all these things of Garabandal happen. And it's interesting because the girls in Garabandal, we have the testimony from one of her teachers years later that the girls literally went up and asked her, what does communism mean? Because they didn't know what the word meant. In other words, Our Lady tells them a word they've never heard in their town, so they talk to their teacher and ask her what it means, because they had no idea. And the other detail, which I think is helpful also for like the whole Garabandal thing, is that Garabandal will happen when the church seems like it is on the point of disappearing. Like those are really strong words. Have we arrived there? Maybe, maybe not. I have no idea. We'll figure it out in the long run.
We could be getting there. Yeah.
We could be getting there. But those are the words. When it seems like the church is about to disappear, that's when all this is going to happen. And if you look at, and the Garabandal miracle will last for 15 minutes. It will be to show God's love to the entire world. And it will be able to be photographed, and anyone who's there will be cured. If you have COVID-19 and it happens in those time period, get there. And because everyone will be cured. And the everyone will convert who's there, and a permanent visible sign will be there. So it's a big deal. So that is a big deal, and it's a promise, and it'll happen. The thing we have to do, though, as Father Luke said, which is even more important than that, is that we all have to try to be saints, because we don't know if we're going to even live tonight. So
That would just end with a blessing if you want to give them. And next Wednesday, hopefully, if you guys have any ideas for any topics or anything you want talked about, we hit this because the movie was being streamed, or the link was open last week, so I kind of wanted you guys to watch the movie on Garabandal. I think they've taken that off now, but a lot of people did take advantage of it. Thanks be to God. So like the book is absolutely great. I definitely recommend getting the book. Write us an email, whatever. If you want, just send us your air code or your address, or whatever. We'll send you a copy. And we'll just end with that. And if you have any ideas for next week's topic or whatever, just throw it in there. Want to give the blessing?
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And the blessing of Almighty God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and of our Heavenly Mother, descend upon you and remain with you forever.
Amen.
Amen.
Go in peace.
Thanks be
Thanks
to God.
be to God.